This video is about crafting introductions according to your audience, your genre, and your purpose, and making sure that you have a fantastic introduction as your first impression. So the first thing to think about when you are creating your introduction, by the way, you don't have to start with your introduction. You can write your paper and then go back to write your introduction, which I do, and it's often very successful, is to really think about the genre that you're writing in, who your audience is, and what your purpose is. So different genres are going to have different types of introductions. So if you're writing a news article, your first paragraph needs to be a summary of the event that you're reporting. So you wouldn't start with any sort of creative introduction. You would dive right in. If you're writing a blog, you need to get your readers' attention because they will not read past that first paragraph if that first paragraph isn't really exciting and interesting. If you are writing a science report, then your first paragraph has to be about the kind of project that you are reporting on. So not all introductions are going to start the same way. However, if you are writing in any kind of persuasive genre and in a way that you would like to argue a point or really get your readers' attention like a blog, then having a more creative and stunning introduction is definitely a good idea. You also want to think about your audience. If your audience is going to be highly academic, you want a more academic introduction. If your audience is your peers, then you want to tone it down a little, make it more relatable, grab their interest in ways that would relate to them. So you really want to think about who you see as your intended audience. And of course, you need to know what your purpose is. If you are trying to persuade, then you want your introduction to be persuasive. If you're trying to inform, then your introduction should be informative. If you are doing some sort of call to action, the first thing you need to do is create a really in-depth interest in your reader. They need to be super interested and invested in what you're talking about. So it's really important for you to understand what the purpose is of what you're writing. So I'm going to go through some various strategies, and I have some examples of those strategies, and I'm just going to read them to you quickly and talk about why they work. So one strategy is to start with an incident or a story that has some sort of drama, and this is really effective in any kind of essay that or writing that is intended to be persuasive and perhaps have good examples where you can do a sort of a hook, where you can begin with this story, and then at the end of the writing, you can hook back to this story and remind your reader. It does a really nice job. It's called framing, and it does a really nice job of helping your reader feel a sense of closure and what it is you have to say. So here's an example. And all of these examples revolve around advertising. Her favorite show goes to commercials. The Bally Fitness ad comes on, a fit lady busting her butt to get fit. The worst thing she can do is get fat. More people are afraid of getting fat than of dying. The next ad, pills you can take to make you shed those unwanted pounds. She wonders if that salad she ate earlier made her put on any weight. She goes to check since she only ran for 3 hours today. She remembers her boyfriend laughing about her flabby thighs, but was he kidding? Her thighs are not supposed to touch at all. She could get rid of that little bit of salad. She did have dressing on it. Maybe it will come up easier if she drinks a little water. She knows she shouldn't keep doing this, but the comments she gets on how great she looks make her feel so much better. In the ER, they weigh her, 89 pounds. Okay, so this is really dramatic, right? Especially when you get to the end here and you find out that the person they're talking about is so thin that she weighs 89 pounds. And this begins with the advertising and what effect it's having, and then goes into the effect. So we get a lot. We know what this paper is going to be about. It's clearly going to be about commercials and advertising and the effect it has on women and their body perceptions. So that's one strategy. Another strategy is to use description, and this can be especially effective in papers where you are in any kind of writing where you are going into depth on something like advertising and you want to be persuasive. So this also works really well for a persuasive sort of genre. So, description. Happy people wearing smiling faces romp on the sunny beach without a care in the world. Their hair billows gently as the breeze wisps through their graying locks. They hold hands lightly as couples do when they have spent years together as extensions of one another. They will enter their golden years together in health and happiness, but only if he uses Viagra. Okay, so a little bit of humor there at the end, right? And the effect of that is that lets your reader know who you are and who you're going to be. You're going to be funny, right? But it's short and lets you know that where they're headed with this. Another strategy, and this is if your genre is going to be more factual, some sort of report or some sort of less persuasive genre and more informative, is to use history or some background, some facts, that kind of thing. So here's an example. According to Statista.com, the U.S. spent approximately $206.77 billion on advertising in 2017, and it costs nearly $5 million to run an ad during the Super Bowl these days. That's a far cry from the beginnings of advertising, which has existed since ancient times of drawing on papyrus and engraving in stone. Seems we have been trying to sell our stuff for all of recorded history. So this gives us a bit of an overview about advertising, but it lets the reader know that this is going to be a more informative piece rather than a persuasive piece. And so you get that feel, but it's also really interesting because we get those facts, right? And by the way, this would be cited if you actually were going to write this paper. Okay, so some other strategies. You can start with quotation. You can go to like quotations.com and just look up quotations on advertising, and there are a lot, and sometimes those quotes can be really interesting to start with. Sometimes you can start with a rhetorical question. So if it were on advertising, you can start with a question like, have you ever wondered what kind of influence advertising actually has on you? So it's not, it's a rhetorical question. It's not meant to be answered, but you could have 1, 2, 3 rhetorical questions just to get the reader to start thinking. You can also start with a definition. So in this case, you could look up the word advertising and what it actually means if it happened to be relevant to your paper. That would be for like perhaps a more factual type of idea, or an idea to be refuted. Perhaps you want to start with something like, people say that advertising has a profound effect on who we are as people. However, and then go into what the fact that maybe you are going to argue that advertising really doesn't have as big of an effect on us as people might think. Okay, so the things you want to avoid. You want to avoid the kind of empty intros that don't really say anything. They wander around the subject. They have really no content. They don't say anything that you haven't already heard before, like, critical thinking is very interesting. There are many people who think critically. The rewards of critical thinking can be tremendous. There's nothing like witnessing a true critical thinker. This is really boring, and it lets your reader know right away that you are going to be boring, and that your whole paper is going to be boring, and you haven't really thought very critically. You also want to avoid drawing attention to the fact that you're writing a paper. You don't, especially that you're writing a paper for a class. It's not what you want to do. So you don't ever want to say, in this paper I will, because it draws that attention to the fact that you are doing such a thing. The only exception to that is if you're writing a very long paper. If you're writing something that's 30 pages, you may want to give your reader a heads up of what they're in for. So that might be appropriate, but in this case, in most of the cases, you're not going to need that. And don't ever apologize. I'm not really an expert on this or whatever. You don't want to do that either. So what you want to know is what this sounds like. So here's an introduction that would not be especially good. Advertising is all around us. It's an important part of our lives as it helps us know about new products, guides our purchasing choices, and keeps our economy in constant motion. Seldom do we think critically about the ads we see daily, especially when those ads portray an unrealistic depiction of beauty. I'm obviously not an advertising expert, but I know that the way these images affect us is important to study. This paper will focus on the problems that come from seeing these ads. Yeah, it's boring. It doesn't tell us anything that we don't already know, and there's no need for it. That is the kind of introduction that you have been taught to write. So you want to avoid those. So keep in mind that the introduction, the first paragraph of your paper, is your reader's first impression of you. It's how you set the tone for who you want to be and what your paper is going to be like, the whole thing. So you want to decide, do you want to be this guy, right? Is this appropriate for your audience and your genre? Do you want to be clean cut, squared away, very businesslike, or do you want to be this guy, right? Do you want to be the tattooed t-shirt guy? You can be either one, but your first paragraph will let your reader know who it is you're going to be and what your whole paper will be like.